Got to turn our attention now to the Ground Puck Seahawks Podcast with Tim Booth and Curtis Crabtree, who have been in the backstage laughing their asses off. It's all brought to you by Georgetown Brewery, locally owned and operated by two diehard Huskies. Manny and Roger, they've been pouring the best local craft beer for the past 23 years, makers of Manny's Pale Ale, Bodie's Off the IPA, host of your other favorite brews, by the way. Tap room is open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Visit them at georgetownbeer.com. Tim Booth, Seattle Times. Curtis Crabtree, Fox 13, Ground Puck Seahawks Podcast here on Mondays. Gentlemen, welcome in. Tim, do you like the bet? Do you like the Steelers -6 tonight? Is Russell Wilson officially back?
He's not back until Mr. Unlimited comes back officially, but the fact that he's making cheesy-ass videos with his wife again on the Roberto Clemente Bridge, that does give you somewhat of an indication that maybe Russell is back a little bit. But is the game in Pittsburgh or is it in New York?
Oh, well, it's in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I probably would have taken the Steelers in the 6 and laid the points there.
Curtis, is he back?
You know what the difference between the Steelers and the Seahawks are? Steelers have a defense, and that should be plenty for.
Wow,
that should be plenty for the Giants in that one tonight.
Does he have a catchphrase yet? Do we know?
I don't. I'm aware of it. Seems like he turned down having one on the broadcast last week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's maybe this is the one area where he's wised up. But again, national TV audience tonight. If he has a good game, I'm sure it'll be like Steelers country. Let's forge metal or something like that.
Yeah, steel up, maybe a steel up or something like that. Yeah. You touched on it, Curtis. Jump right into the defense. Jim and I went over the stats from last year, now compared to this year. I mean, we now have, this is a good time to, I think, evaluate the entire team, right? It's after 8 games. They're 4-4. Their defense in every statistical category has not improved from a year ago. They still can't stop the run. Total yards basically the same. Points given up the same. He was brought in here, was Mike McDonald, to fix the defense, and so far he hasn't been able to do that.
Statistically, yesterday they finished with no sacks, no tackles for loss, no quarterback hits, allowed 440 some yards. You had 2 of those obviously negated via penalty with the Boye Mafe strip sack and the Derek Hall hit that led to the penalty and all of that. But yeah, they have their issues still on that side of the football for sure. And you're throwing a linebacker in Ernest Jones in his first game and leads them with 15 tackles, but even still, I don't think everything fit together necessarily perfect on that side of the ball. Defensive line had, I thought, a little bit more issues yesterday. Setting the edge at times and keeping the run game kind of kept in where it needs to be. And it's still a work in progress for them. They are not, it seems like we're a very, very, very long way away from the 3-0 start to the season. That's for sure.
Tim, your evaluation of what we've seen so far through 8 games with the defense.
I think the disappointing thing is Mike was brought in because of not only because he is a extremely smart defensive mind, but he's extremely creative. And there were things that, again, personnel matters, but there were things that they did in Baltimore which put guys with unique skills into positions to let them thrive and allow them to cause disruption in a way that they hadn't in other places in their career or other times in their careers. Kyle Van Noy, Jadeveon Clowney last year with his resurgence. Like, guys, he found a way to put those guys into places where they were impactful and disruptive defensive players. And it feels like this defense since week 1 has gotten more and more bland and more plain. And some of that some of the unique coverages and the unique disguising and the unique blitzes and the pressures, some of those things that he was known for and was talked about throughout the offseason seem like they have gotten less and less evident and less a part of the defensive game plan. And when your fundamentals are as poor as they have been when it comes to simple things like stopping the run, I think it's led to some of those things being dialed back, and it's made this defense not only not very good fundamentally in doing the basics, but also not dynamic and not disruptive in the way that everyone was hoping it was going to be during the offseason and during the transition. Like, where's Devin Witherspoon as a blitzer? Where is Devin Witherspoon as being the Kyle Hamilton of the Seahawks defense? It just feels like it's a very plain, mediocre unit right now. And as this is a criticism of Mike, but it doesn't feel like he's scheming it up in a way to allow them to make up for some of their deficiencies by being, more disruptive and more dynamic in some of the ways that we saw him do with the Ravens.
Yeah, they just, God, Curtis, to give me those stats, I think I glossed over that, just the pressures and the sacks and the TFLs. They just were never a factor at all, whether it was stopping Cook and Davis in the running game or even, Allen to that degree. But in the passing game, he just never once yesterday was under any type of duress at all.
Not really. And the couple times they did, they obviously made penalties to wipe those out. But yeah, it comes back to the same thing we talked about at the start of the season, line of scrimmage, man. Like, I think one of the reasons they aren't as dynamic on defense is because they're giving up as much as they are on the ground on the first and second down plays, to where they're not facing that many third and long situations where they can get super exotic and, bring pressures and do so compared to other teams, do that stuff as regularly as you might want to see. I mean, look at that first drive of the game. Buffalo essentially goes 110 yards on them, that opening drive, after the 3 offensive penalties, straight down the field. The longest third down they only had one third down that was longer than 3rd and 4 to face. It was the 3rd and 8 one. So they basically just stayed on schedule all the way down the field on Seattle, did both run and pass, did everything they wanted on them, and marched it straight up them, for an opening score. So, not what you want to see. And when you're losing the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football, the way that they are, it makes it really tough to try to kind of be able to compete at the level you want to and do all of the things you're hoping to be able to do schematically, because you're just losing the physical battle.
What did you guys think, Tim? You go first. What did you think of just the way they handled themselves yesterday? I mean, it's you've got the. And again, I understand tempers flare. I'm not going to make too big of a deal with Jaron Reed and Derek Hall, other than just to say you normally don't see, two things. Normally you don't see it happen on the field. It's usually on the sideline. And They had another issue on the sideline. The best part of that, though, was the peacemaker and all of that was a Buffalo Bills offensive lineman. That was the highlight of the game for me, that a guy on the opposing team was the one who broke it up between two teammates going after. Hey, fellas, what are we doing here? Why don't you guys go back to your huddle and make up? But you got that. You've got Geno throwing the football at someone, at a defender. You got Geno barking it at Lockett and JSN inside the 5-yard line. He appears to be crying on the sideline. It's just, I'll play the video for you. I don't know if you noticed it, but I thought, Riq Woolen's effort on the Kincade touchdown was, surprising. It just, I don't know. They just came unloose yesterday. Tim?
I don't know if it was unloose. I thought effort was poor, and I thought the Woolen play was kind of, I noticed that it in real time. Like, Riq didn't make much of an effort there to try and tackle him from behind. It was like once Kincade got a step on him on that little route in cut, it was like, oh, okay, I can't tackle him, and it almost looked like he shoved him into the end zone. Honestly.
Well, he did. I got into a debate like if you're listening, we're playing it on the video. Go back and watch it later. But he shoves him in the back. It's unbelievable. But he didn't seem right, Tim, that he gave much effort on that play.
And I just think it in a broader sense. It was like all the frustration that we feel privately at times for various things in our lives or in our professions. We're all pretty good about keeping that in expressing it in a private setting where you don't have 69,000 people plus, a television audience watching. And it was like all of the frustration that the Seahawks had about how bad yesterday was going all bubbled up in a very public setting. I don't have an issue with frankly any of it. Like, you should be frustrated and pissed off at the way you played. You should be with how that game was going. Geno should be barking at Lockett for false start. I think it was down in the near the red zone, low red zone. He should, I got no problem with Hall and Reed going at it, because Hall should be called out for making a dumbass play in that moment and even risking the chance of hitting Allen when it was clear that there was a flag thrown and he was throwing the ball away. Like the amount of disappointment and frustration about the way they played yesterday, I think the outward expressions that we saw of it, in some ways, I think it's a good thing, because it shows that these guys are actually pissed off about what they were putting out there yesterday, and that it's not acceptable to them.
Curtis?
Yeah, I mean, that's four losses in 5 games, right? Like, all things considered, like, it's a pretty bad stretch that they're on, and I think that can kind of catch up to you to where you see what happens with Reed and Hall, and nothing overly wild on that standpoint. We've seen that plenty of times before in the NFL. It's not anything to get too worked up about. But yeah, I mean, they're just not playing good enough football right now, collectively long enough. And you see that frustration kind of boil to the surface a little bit. And with the mistakes they made yesterday, I mean, that's basically all I wrote about last night was this game just comes down to Seattle's own mistakes. You talk about the couple snaps issues with Connor Williams and then that play with Derek Hall. I mean, they basically lost 14 points thereabouts in the wash with plays, that happened there, allowing the extra 4 points to happen to Buffalo after the Hall personal foul, and then the 2 lost opportunities at touchdowns down in their own end with snap issues and everything. So just really sloppy game for them, and they don't have the margin of error to be that kind of sloppy and still manage to dig themselves out of the hole. And they've been playing from behind a lot recently, and they don't quite have the ceiling, the ability to do that often to that extent against good teams like Buffalo.
Well, Curtis, what did you think of Geno's just body language? And this isn't just this last game, but it's been several games where he's just had this, after getting stepped on, he's running off the field, shaking his head, not wanting to talk to anyone. I mentioned before, it appears that it looks like he's crying or very emotional on the sideline. We touched in on the, barking at Lockett and JSN when they were in the red zone, but just the overall body language, from him. And I think he even had, I don't know if you asked a question in the postgame last night about getting stepped on, but he was kind of short. It was a Condotta. He was kind of short with that one. But what do you make overall of him and of his body language in the last few games? Big deal or not?
It doesn't bother me. That's not saying it can't bother others, but it doesn't. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, he clearly still cares, even if his emotions might manifest in a slightly different way than some other people's could. Yeah, I don't know that it's that. I don't know if it's that big of a deal or not, but obviously, look, Geno wants to win, man.
Sure,
he does, and to have the game go sideways in the way that it did, like those are plays that you feel like are completely out of your control. It's not like you, when you're seeing a ball fly 15 feet over your head for a 25-yard loss when you're right on the doorstep, and then the very next time you're down there to have the play where Connor Williams steps on his foot in the snapping process there, not being able to get out of center and having another opportunity slip away from you. That's just, I can understand where the frustration comes through in that specific moment. So if others want to be more critical of that, I mean, I don't think it's unfair to necessarily do so, but it doesn't rankle me all that much personally when I look at it.
As bad as they played, Tim, you look at like a few plays, at least just stand out to me. I mean, everyone's going to have the plays that stand out to everyone, but I think we all agree on the, you settle for a field goal when you're inside, the 5-yard line. You can't punch it in. After the interception to Job, you get nothing, right? You get stuffed, or you not get stuffed, but he gets stepped on. And then I look at and I can't remember. I asked this earlier, and I still can't remember. When Allen fumbled the football and kicked it, was that at the end of the first half on that drive, or was it in the third quarter?
It was late first half, but it was outside the 2-minute window. If that had been inside the 2-minute window, the fumble would have gone back to the spot of where he fumbled it. But because it was outside,
oh, really?
Yes, it's the Dave Casper holy roller rule from back in the 70s with the Raiders.
Yeah.
If it had been outside of 2 minutes, or inside of 2 minutes, the fumble would have gone back to where he dropped it, which would have been short of the first down as it was. But I think it was somewhere around 4 minutes left in the first half.
3 minutes, 2:55 was when.
So it's the last. So it's the last drive of that half. My point is, you think about football and sports. There's an element of luck.
Yeah,
I mean, how many times the guy kicks it and it goes right to another player, and the Seahawks get the ball there, and again, it's 7-3 with another chance to have a drive and take the lead or get a field goal, pull within one, and you're looking, clearly, Tim, a much different football game.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's those bounces and there's those those lucky breaks or whatever that go a team's way that obviously play into the success that a team is going to have in a game, especially in a day when statistically you end up being so lopsidedly routed. You need a break like that. You need a Josh Jobe to come up with a pick and return it to the 7-yard line and actually cash in on it. You need a Josh Allen fumble to end up in your hands and not bounce right to a Bills player. They just, they got some very unlucky, unfortunate bounces or plays yesterday. If Connor Williams snaps it to Geno and they punch it in there, totally different game.
Yeah.
If the offensive line gets any sort of push on 3rd and goal at the 1 for Kenneth Walker to get into the end zone and help my fantasy team in the process, the 4th down play where Geno trips never happens, clearly. So, there's just, it's the butterfly effect of sports. Like you're in a game, one thing happens and all these other elements or all these other moments happen based off of that one thing that goes your way or doesn't go your way. And it seemed like all of them sort of went against Seattle yesterday.
Curtis, do you think they've just flat out just given up on the running game because they say to themselves, we just can't run the ball? We cannot block it. So why am I going to sit there and just run them into a wall of guys every single time?
Well, I could certainly see some of that. I mean, they had was an average of 1.9 yards per carry yesterday, and that's with the 16 yards on 5 carries that Geno had scrambling. I mean, if you combine just the running backs, you've got 12 carries for 16 yards, averaging 1.3 yards a rush. I mean, they did nothing on the ground. And that's just, at that point, you're putting everything in Geno's hands. And for an offensive line that has shown it is continuing to have issues protecting him regularly, I don't care what quarterback you're putting in there. You can put the guy who was upstairs in the broadcast booth yesterday back there, and he ain't doing much better either, like, given the circumstances they're playing with right now. They need to find some way to get better push on the offensive line, create some running room for these guys. I mean, think back to the games where they did have some success running this year and how much we marveled at Ken Walker making things out of nothing in some of those circumstances, because it hasn't been blocked there, a good chunk of the time. So, yeah, it's basically rely on Geno to move the football for him. And then when he did yesterday, it ended up in a calamity at the end of those drives because of the various things we already talked about. He put together a couple very, very nice drives from the one that, to get him down there, and you basically come away with nothing both times outside of the one field goal. And you get one touchdown there. It looks a little bit different. You cash in after the Jobe interception. You could somehow be leading that game despite being, woefully offset in the yardage and the time of possession and all of those stats and all those things. So you had a chance to find a way to be right there, and you missed those opportunities, and things went awry, and you couldn't do it multiple times yesterday to bail them out.
Just live in let's live in a hypothetical revisionist world, Tim. They go, and I thought, and I turned to my brother and said this, and I was like, man, that's like one of the best drives I've seen from an offensive coordinator. That drive where they ended up with just 3 was a clinic. I mean, they had them off balance, different plays, different looks. It was beautiful. And then it results just in 3 points. But, Tim, let's live in a hypothetical world. They score there. It's 10-7. Right? They throw the pick. You score, and again, all of a sudden 17-7. I mean, it was remarkable how much different the game would look. But, I don't know if you or Curtis said it earlier, but they're not talented enough to walk that fine line.
Oh, not at all. I think that's – in some ways, I don't want to compare it entirely with 2010 when Pete came in, but in some ways we are seeing similarities between the two, because that team that Pete inherited and John and him made 10,000 roster moves to try and put together a competitive team. They were competitive that first year, obviously, by winning the division at 7-9, but there was no depth. There was nothing behind those front line, those first 22 guys that they rolled out there, and it feels like this team should have more depth. This team should have more talent, but we're not seeing it. And so in that way, it feels like it's a very heavily loaded. You've got offensive line notwithstanding, you have 22 guys who can play, and then beyond that, you maybe got like 5 more, and that's sort of the depth of your team. Which goes back to the idea of they are writing such a thin margin right now of what leads to success versus what doesn't, and you can't make dumbass mistakes with penalties, turnovers, bad snaps, whatever. Those just amplify and quickly snowball into kind of what we saw yesterday.
So what I mean, I don't know. What do they do moving forward, Curtis? If they can't run the football, and again, I know the Bills' defensive front is very good, but if they can't run the football, do they just try to get Ken Walker involved more in the passing game? He's good out of the backfield. He's good at catching screens, good at catching flat passes. I mean, the best running play they have, Curtis, is what they did yesterday, where they try to do that pitch and then they fumble it and back in the in the backfield, and then he picks it up and runs around. That's their best play. So I think maybe they should just do that more consistently, just have a broken play and, hey, Walker, just find something. But how do you get him more involved in the offense? You just use him in the passing game?
You probably have to. I mean, look, I think 80% of this team's problems is the offensive line. We're like, truly, that's most of what their issue is. And it's the fact that they have so many issues up front that the running game is affected. It leads to the passing situations where Geno's under pressure. The guard play has not been great. You've obviously, there was nothing, Connor Williams made the mistake with the snap. Sure. It's not like there was a lack of effort or something. Ball got away from him. Same thing on the snap at the goal line. He stepped. That's pretty much, I think, his technique he's supposed to do on that play. It just so happens his step that he takes is right on top of Geno's shoe. That's just, it went awry on him. And that's kind of the way the offensive line's going. Even when they're trying to do things well, it's not right now. And maybe that changes if Abe Lucas is able to get back to add a little bit of piece there. Maybe at that point they can try throwing Jason Peters in at guard and see if that can kind of change things a little bit as well. I do think they have a couple options to consider coming out of the bye week here. If Abe's going to be back healthy, George Fant gets back in the lineup. That gives them, I think we're forgetting the fact they are down to their fourth string right tackle right now in Mike Jarrell compared to what they started the season with. So most of the focus has got to be there and figuring out some way to make that floor rise, because that's, the struggles of the offense then means the defense has to be on the field more. I think that's why I say 80% of it's on the offensive line, is because I think it's all a trickle down from the fact that the offensive line play has been as porous as it has been.
Go ahead, Tim.
I was just going to jump in really quick. This is where Ryan Grubb's got to be more creative. Kind of like what we were talking about earlier with McDonald and some of the creativity that he was able to show in Baltimore. Yeah. This is where Ryan Grubb's got to get paid, or make his money. Just figure out a way to at least make the run game respectable, or a semblance of the run game, knowing the limitations that you have based around how bad your offensive line is right now. And if that means, some of those quick, short motion, quick screen kind of things to Ken Walker and get him outside. Maybe it's doing more. One thing I noticed yesterday with Buffalo was they were really good early on at just throwing a couple of quick screens to Khalil Shakir and letting him and just letting him go in space. And if nothing else, it just, anytime Seattle saw that formation from then on out, they had to think, oh, is this going to be a quick screen? And maybe that opened things up for James Cook in the run game from there. Just think of things in a little bit more of a creative way of how to get your playmakers opportunities in space to see if it at all will allow more of that interior run game to sort of develop based around, what else you're doing. Because it just doesn't, running between the tackles just is not working for this team. To your point, Puck, Kenneth Walker's drop the pitch and then pick it up and run across the field. That was his longest run yesterday. It was 5 yards. Like that should not be the foundations of your run game, is that play right there. This as much as, yes, the offensive line is not good and they are a anchor that's pulling this entire offense down right now. This also has to go back to Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff to an extent and say, okay, you guys were really creative in doing some unique things at Washington. Now we need to see it actually show up here in Seattle, because we have these limitations and they're not going away, at least for one more game, and probably not for for the rest of the season. Let's see you make your money now and come up with some new ways to make this thing work.
And it's been a while. Yeah, go ahead, Curtis.
I was going to say, look, they had the couple middle screens that they ran there. I think it was even on that drive we talked about earlier that looked like they were both there and pretty successful. They come out in the third quarter, try to run another screen, and that's the play where Geno gets picked off when they haven't really covered. So, like, yesterday they just didn't have it, man. The Bills had answers for everything they were trying to do.
Yeah, and then it's a weird thing is like this Jekyll and Hyde here of this football team, right? It's 1 week, and it's a roller coaster. One week they look good, this week they look bad. To me, it's been like this for the whole NFL season. By the way, I mean, you just look at yesterday in the NFL. I mean, the Browns beating the Ravens, Patriots beating the Jets. I mean, not the Jets are any good, but I'm just it's like things that are just happen in this league, especially in the NFCs. There's no team other than the Lions, and then I think we can probably throw in the Niners if they can get healthy, if McCaffrey ever does come back, where those are the two teams. Other than that, no one is significantly better really than Seattle, at least I don't think. So, I don't know what to expect this week from them. I mean, I think anybody can see them going out and beating the Rams. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, they beat the Rams, they're 5-4. Tim, they go into the break, they go into the bye week, where they face the Niners, and who knows what happens this week. I know Niners are off this week, I think, right?
Yes.
And then, so God, I mean, you're right there. They haven't lost anything yet, Tim.
I was talking with someone last night after the game, and we were commenting about how at that point the Niners were down, I think 10-0 to the Cowboys. But we were commenting the idea of like, your NFC West leaders after last night, based around the first half of that Sunday night game, could have been Arizona and Seattle both at 4-4, with the Niners at 3-5, and this thing careening toward an 8-9 team winning the NFC West. Like, that's even now with all three of those teams at 4-4, that's a very real possibility, because yes, San Francisco should be the best of all four teams in the division, but you're right. They've got so many injury issues that eventually, if McCaffrey doesn't come back, you would think it's going to catch up with them, further down the road as the season progresses. And, Jordan Mason's got his issues and everything. And so you're right. Like this has been a very bipolar season from teams in the NFC, especially. Like the only thing you can really count on is Kansas City. Like otherwise, everything else has just been sort of all over the place. So yeah, you beat the Rams, you go into the bye at 5-4, you come out maybe healthier than you've been, all season at that point. And especially if you're getting in a couple guys back on the offensive line, I mean, sure, anything's possible. I mean, that the way the post bye starts with San Francisco, Arizona, and then going to the Jets, I don't know, it doesn't look quite as daunting as maybe you felt beforehand. I don't. Again, it kind of describes this entire season. Like it's just all over the place. You have no basis to know what you're going to get on a week to week basis. If they play like they did against Atlanta, they're going to steamroll the Rams. I don't think the Rams are a great team, but they play like they did yesterday. Cooper Kupp's going to have, and Puka Nacua are going to have like 35 catches between them.
There it is. Wrap it up. The Ground Puck Seahawks Podcast. Tim Booth, Seattle Times. Curtis Crabtree of Fox 13. Check out those guys' work. Please, it's all brought to you by Georgetown Brewery. Locally owned and operated. Two diehard Huskies. Manny and Roger have been pouring the best craft beer for the past 23 years. Tap room is open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Go visit georgetownbeer.com. You can find this episode up on YouTube. Also, check it out on Apple and Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. And, of course, up at pucksports.com.